It usually begins the same way. A sudden decision. A moment where something inside you says, enough. Cyrus, am I missing anything?
Yeah, I think so, bro. You wake up early, you make a plan, you promise yourself things will be different this time. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks, it works. You feel energized, focused, motivated. Then slowly, something changes. The excitement fades, the effort feels heavier, and one day you realize the feeling that once pushed you forward is gone. And the question appears in your mind.
What happened to my motivation?
Most people think motivation abandoned them. They assume that successful people simply have more of it, more drive, more discipline, more internal fire. But psychology suggests something very different. Motivation was never designed to stay with you forever. In psychology, motivation is defined as the internal process that initiates, directs, and sustains behavior. But there's a critical detail people overlook. Motivation is not stable. It changes constantly, depending on emotional state, environment, perceived difficulty, energy levels, and reward expectation. Motivation isn't a power source. It's a signal that tells the brain,
This might be worth the effort.
deep inside the brain, motivation is tied closely to dopamine. Dopamine isn't really the pleasure chemical like people believe. It's more about anticipation. When your brain predicts a reward, dopamine increases. This is why you feel motivated when you imagine achieving a goal, starting something new, becoming a better version of yourself. But the brain adapts quickly. Once an activity becomes familiar, the dopamine response decreases. The excitement fades, not because something is wrong with you, but because your brain adjusted. This leads to one of the biggest psychological misconceptions. People believe success is driven by motivation, but motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes for everyone. The people who succeed long-term rarely depend on motivation. Instead, they rely on things far less exciting: habits, routines, systems, environment design. Motivation is just the spark. Progress requires something that lasts longer than a spark. Psychologists often describe two forms of motivation. The first is extrinsic motivation. This comes from external rewards: money, praise, recognition, avoiding punishment. These rewards can push behavior, but when they disappear, motivation often disappears too. The second is intrinsic motivation. This comes from within: curiosity, enjoyment, mastery, personal meaning. Intrinsic motivation lasts longer because the reward is built into the activity itself. But even intrinsic motivation fades with repetition because the brain naturally adapts. Several psychological forces slowly weaken motivation. One is cognitive overload. When a goal feels too big, the brain sees high effort and uncertain reward. Motivation decreases. Another is delayed gratification. The brain evolved to prioritize immediate rewards, but meaningful goals often require months or years of effort. The longer the reward takes, the harder motivation becomes to maintain. The final force is identity conflict. If your goal doesn't align with how you see yourself, the mind resists. Someone who believes, "I'm not disciplined," will struggle to consistently act disciplined, not because they can't, but because the behavior conflicts with their identity. Most people believe the pattern is motivation, action. But psychology often shows the opposite: action, progress, dopamine, motivation. In other words, motivation frequently appears after you begin, not before. Over time, something stronger than motivation begins guiding behavior: identity. People naturally act in ways that reinforce who they believe they are. Someone who believes, "I'm the type of person who works out," no longer needs to rely on motivation. The action becomes part of who they are.
Motivation was never meant to sustain effort forever. Its purpose is simple. Motivation exists to help you start. But what carries you forward is something quieter. Habits, structure, consistency. Motivation isn't the engine of progress. It's the spark that reminds you the engine exists.